Hello, Peter Ward. Just a quick look at some of the new capabilities in the GPX viewer as of the 25th of November, with a word that it can get quite complicated quite quickly. Let's just start by opening a fairly simple file and show you a couple of the features. So let's go into the gradient changer, and by moving the threshold up, see which ones are the most severe. So 169 and 170. There's fairly abrupt changes in gradient there, and one way of smoothing these out is simply to replace that single track point where the transition occurs with two track points slightly spaced out with two slightly smaller transitions like that, and maybe do the same there as well, and that way you keep the slope but you ease the transition in and out of the slope. So that's one way of fixing that kind of problem. The other way is perhaps slightly more drastic. Let me just undo those changes. This is the concept now is of bracketing. We do this with what we call a marker. So we drop the marker, and if we move the marker, we drop the marker at the current node, so they're both overlapped and you can't see the purple one. Now you can see the purple one and the orange one. The orange one we move back and forward here, and the purple one we move backwards and forwards here. So I bracket a section of track between those two markers, and then I can simply apply a uniform gradient between those two markers, which is a bit coarse. Let me undo that and show you the bumpiness factor. Bumpiness factor can be anything up from 0, which is completely flat, to 1, which actually means make no difference at all, like that, or in between. Let's just stick it around about 0.5-ish, and that gives me some transitions, smooths out the gradients, but keeps an element of interest in the ride. So there's two options there for smoothing gradient, essentially. Let me now go to another file and show you some bend smoothing examples. So under plan, quickest way to get there is to go to the bend smoother and look at the direction change threshold setting. That gives me a couple of bends that might require some attention. Let's go to 86, which is the particularly sharp at the base of the climb. Again, we drop the marker, we move the marker out to one side of the bend and the other side of the bend, and you can see that's suggesting a way of smoothing between those two markers. Not all of these suggestions will make any sense, but where they do, you can choose between 2 up to 10 road segments to be inserted to give you different degrees of smoothness. I'm not quite sure how Magic Roads will respond to that. I haven't done much testing yet. So let's smooth that bend. That one's done. Let's go to the next one, which is actually a kind of combination bend here, and dropping the new marker. So we'll just demonstrate that you can do this in third person view as well, just for a bit of interest. I drop the marker in the bend smoother. You can now see the purple cone there. So we'll move that to one side and the cone to the other side, and there you can see the suggested bend, the yellow line. You can just check that for gradient, sort of, actually, because it will in fact smooth the gradient as well. So we'll smooth that bend out, put some more segments in because it's quite an open bend. And that's our bend smoothed. Bend smoothing is fine in principle, but when the bends become very tight and the gradients become very tight, such as up in the mountain switchbacks, then you'll just need to be a little bit more circumspect, and there's a lot more trial and error. I'll tell you what, let's just get rid of some of this visual clutter and go up into the hairpins where there are many egregious bends. I'd like to look at the third person view for a while. Okay, let's just pick one sort of semi-randomly. There's a hairpin bend. Most of these hairpins are a bit effy. In fact, that one above there looks tricky, doesn't it? Let's just go up there. There we go. So let's look at this one. This is an interesting one because not only is it a bit funny around the bend, but it's also a bit funny as far as the gradient is concerned. So what you might want to do is a combination approach here. You could, for instance, go to gradient smoother first, and use the gradient smoother to say, you know what, actually I'm just going to smooth a very large section of track around that bend. So vertically it's okay, and now I can concentrate on getting the curvature right. And you can see here that that's a very bad suggestion, which is what happens when the bend goes round more than 180 degrees. So let's just drop a new marker and then see what happens as we move it slowly around the bend. And that's quite nice. If you go any further, it gets confused. But there, happy medium. How many segments do we need? Probably not too many. Bend is done. Look at the third person view, and happy days.